Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociological research method, in today's lecture we are going to discuss on the primary and secondary sources of data. In the first half, we discussed upon the nature of data, trying to understand the meaning of data, the characteristics, how it impacts research, and also the different levels of abstraction from knowledge, theory, concepts, variables and values of data. In this half of the lecture, we are going to talk about the classification of data into primary and secondary data. So, primary versus secondary data is basically a way in which data has been classified depending on how close they are to the original event. The categorization of data is based on its closeness to the original event or phenomena being studied. Primary data is the original source. That implies that the researcher is the first person who is going to collect this data. So, the original source is the researcher himself or herself. Data that has been observed, experienced or recorded close to the event or phenomena. It represents the nearest one can get to the truth or the raw fact. What are the characteristics of primary data? It is collected directly by the researcher or through a direct interaction with subject. It has been interpreted or filtered by an intermediary. Generally considered the most reliable form of data for answering specific research questions. Examples: personal experience of an event, like witnessing the fire in your house. So, you are the most close to that event and you will be the source of data. So, if you are going to tell somebody about the fire, you are the source of that information. A second example, a scientist raw reading from a lab experiment. So, in physical sciences, the scientist does certain original experiment and the result of that experience is the primary data. The third example of primary data is the original transcript of an interview you conducted, that is a researcher has conducted. Written or recorded sources are secondary data and these are interpreted, analyzed or record primary data. So, the first is primary data, which is the original data, original source, and if that primary data is analyzed or interpreted by someone else, it becomes secondary data. Secondary data are removed from the original event by at least one level of interpretation. Secondary data, also kind of termed as the interpreted source, are accessed through a third party. It carries the potential for distortion due to the intermediary interpretation, selection bias or recording errors. While often useful for context and background, it is generally considered less reliable than primary data for establishing the original facts of an event. Examples of secondary data are the reporter's interpretation of witness or records, a review article or textbook summarizing multiple studies, a historian analysis of a diary, the primary source. So, someone is interpreting the biography or the diary written by a person, it becomes a secondary source. Another example could be government census data that has been aggregated and summarized into an economic So, whenever we are doing any kind of study of the poverty, the health, we use NHS data or you use the census data. So, these are secondary sources of data. While primary data is often preferred for its reliability, collecting it is usually time consuming and expensive. Now, the collection of the primary data, how expensive or how much of time it would take depends on the nature of the research. If it is a kind of the sample or if it is kind of a large survey, it becomes time consuming. Secondary data is often quicker and cheaper to acquire because you do not have to go and do any kind of interviews or fill form. The data is already available there, you just have to refer to that data. Now, when we talk about the primary and secondary data, we know that there are four basic types of primary data collection. Now, primary data is information collected directly and first hand, offering the closest proximity to the event or phenomenon. The method you listed categorizes how this direct engagement occurs. Number 1, measurement. This involves gathering quantitative data, collection of numbers that precisely indicate amount or magnitudes, often with the help of instrument. Using standardized tools like clocks, scales, thermometers, survey to assign numerical value. Examples are voting polls, number of votes, exam results, numerical score. You know how many have scored first division, you would take the exam results. Car mileage, so if you were to compare the mileage of car, 2 or 4 car, then we'll take the performance of car, we would take the mileage of the vehicle. Then we have over several things like temperature, barometric pressure. So, wherever there is a quantitative variable included, they could be the use of techniques for measuring these quantitative data. And the purpose is to establish objective facts and allow for statistical analysis. The second method of primary data collection is observation. This is the process of recording events, situations, or things as they are directly experienced, often using sensory aids. What is the method used for observation? Using your senses, sight, sound, etc., augmented by instruments that record the event without interpreting the subjective perspective. For example, recording animal behavior in the wild, using a camera or a tape recorder to capture the meeting, recording cell structure using a microscope, or an urban planner noting traffic flow patterns. The purpose of observation is to capture the reality of a situation as it unfolds in its natural context. And the observation or participant observation is a method which is used in qualitative data collection. The third is interrogation. This method involves actively asking questions to elicit information that cannot be directly observed, like internal states, opinion, or past events. Gaining data through asking and probing, typically via survey, interviews, or questionnaire. An example includes gathering information about people's convictions, likes, dislikes, motivations, fear, or factual information about past action. The purpose of interrogation is to access subjective experience, attitude, and unobservable cognitive data. So, this is more kind of used in say a time when we need to understand, say, opinion, perspective, or the emotional state response to an event. So, it is used. And the fourth is participation. This involves the researcher actively engaging in the event or process being studied to gain first-hand internalized experience and understanding. Ethnographic studies are basically based on participation. For example, the internal experience of learning to ride a bike, gaining complex intuitive knowledge about the balance and traffic, or a sociologist joining a group to understand its dynamic from the inside. So, in sociology, all ethnographic study are basically using the participation as a technique for primary data collection. The purpose of participation is to acquire deep, nuanced contextual knowledge and subjective insight, often inaccessible through pure observation or interrogation. Now, these 4 methods, that is measurement, observation, interrogation, and participation, ensure that the researcher can capture data in various formats. What are the formats? Numerical, it could be quantitative data, visual, experiential, and attitudinal. All these formats will together go to build a robust and well-rounded understanding of a phenomena. Now, when we talk about data, primary data, we know why is it preferred. Why does a researcher prefer primary data over secondary data? In other words, what are the advantages of using primary data? So, as data recorded closest to the event, it offers the nearest approximation to the truth and highly reliable for answering the specific research question it was designed for. The data is collected specifically for the research project, ensuring it is highly relevant and addresses the research question exactly. Researchers maintain complete control over the data collection process, including the sampling instrument design and context, minimizing the risk of unknown biases introduced by others. It provides unfiltered insights free from the interpretation or distortion of a third party. Why is it not always possible? So, it is not kind of convenient to every time collect primary data. So, what are the reasons why it is not possible? That one is the designing instrument. Sampling, gathering and cleaning raw data takes significant time, often extending the research timeline considerably. So, if there is limited time for your data collection, then it is kind of time consuming to go and collect primary data. So, the researcher take recourse to the secondary data. The second reason why it is not preferred is organizing large scale studies, survey, experiment, ethnographic research requires substantial financial resources for personal material and logistic. So, because of the financial crunch, the logistics, and it is a large scale study, it is kind of not feasible possible to do the research. Researcher would prefer for secondary data. The third reason why it would not be preferred is the accessibility and feasibility. It is not possible to get direct access to the subject. Studying historical events where no direct evidence remains, or studying extremely rare phenomena. The fourth reason is ethical constraint. Ethical guidelines from prevent direct access or observe example highly private or sensitive behavior. While more data generally leads to greater reliability, the cost of organizing the massive survey needs to acquire very large reliable data sets can be prohibitive. So, now we come to the characteristic of secondary data. Now, secondary data, as we already understood, is defined by its indirect relationship to the original event or phenomena. It sits one or more steps removed from the primary collection, having been processed by an intermediary. The key feature is that the data has been interpreted, analyzed, or summarized by someone other than the person collecting the raw fact. This filtering makes it quick to use but acquires careful scrutiny. Secondary data is extremely common in modern life and research, originating from various contexts. Number one, that is the source of secondary data, is news, advertising, documentary, and this is aimed at a general audience. Second could be scholarly and technical, referred journals and professional books aimed at experts, often obtaining high quality analysis of primary research. The third source could be websites and reports. Quality varies widely from informal blogs to official government documents. And therefore, we can say that secondary data is often wrapped, packed and spun to be pithy and digestible. So, it is kind of ready made, you just kind of take that, put it into your report and do the data analysis. So, it is whatever you abstract whatever the primary data is required for your research, and therefore, this secondary data becomes a source of your research analysis. This makes it incredibly easy and fast to use for background, literature review and trend analysis. This same processing introducing the risk of simplification or bias. The intermediary may have selected only certain facts, emphasized a particular interpretation or omitted crucial context from the original primary resource. Because of its inherent risk, the next critical step for any researcher utilizing secondary data is to perform a thorough critical evaluation of its quality and source credibility. So, quantitative and qualitative data and levels of measurement. So, these we need to understand what are the different levels on which the data are measured. So, data in research fall into two broad categories based on their characteristic, and that is quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative data refers to information that can be reduced to numbers. This type of data records quantities and allows researcher to measure and count attributes. What are the characteristics of quantitative data? Number one, expressed as numerical values, amount, magnitude, scores. Second, focuses on the question how much or how many. An example of quantitative data are pressure, bending force, population density, cost indices, voting polls, exam scores, car mileage as the examples of quantitative data. These data can be analyzed using the techniques of statistics, allowing for calculations like average, correlations and test of significance. Quantitative data often collected using measurement and structured observation techniques. The second type of data is qualitative data, or it is words. The data refers to information that can only be presented in words or descriptive text. This type of data records qualities, focusing on depth of understanding and descriptive richness. The characteristics of qualitative data are expressed as non-numerical description. So, it is expressed in the form of a text, audio, video. The focus on the question is why and how. Example includes people's judgment, feelings of comfort, emotions, ideas, beliefs, personal experiences, interview transcript. Qualitative data cannot be manipulated mathematically, requires quite different analytical techniques such as thematic analysis, content analysis, and discourse analysis to identify pattern and themes in the descriptive information. Often collected using interrogation, open-ended interviews and participant observation using field notes and rich descriptions. It also uses narratives, the way in which respondents are kind of narrating or sharing any events or experience. So, the impact on research, that is the choice of quantitative or qualitative data, fundamentally affects the way data are collected, recorded and analyzed in research projects. The quantitative data emphasizes breadth, generalizability and statistical testing of hypotheses. The qualitative data emphasizes depth, rich detail, contextual understanding and exploring complex phenomena. Effective research often combines both quantitative and qualitative data to provide a fuller picture of the topic under study, balancing the strength and limitation of each type of data. And when both type of data is used, say qualitative and quantitative, its kind of method is known as mixed method. Now, next we, after understanding the classification of data, we understand the measurement of data. And here this discusses various level of measurement. The first is nominal level of measurement, is the most basic type of measurement used to categorize data into distinct mutually exclusive groups or category based on names or levels. Each category is unique and there is no overlap, which ensures clear differentiation. Example includes gender, male and female, types of building, commercial, industrial, educational, religious, or marital status, that is single, married, divorced. Nominal data represent qualitative distinction without any inherent order or hierarchy. They can be analyzed using simple methods such as frequency count, percentage, and visual tools like bar, graph, or pie chart. The main statistical measure used for nominal data is the mode which identifies the most common characteristic within a data set. While nominal data cannot convey any sense of ranking or magnitude, they are essential for classification and comparison, allowing researcher to include or exclude cases based on categories and to perform basic categorical analysis. Ordinal level measurement ranks data based on a shared property reflecting the relative order of cases without specifying the exact difference between them. Unlike nominal data, ordinal data shows whether one case is more or less than another along a continuum. For example, ranking children by size without measuring height or classifying workers as unskilled, semi-skilled or skilled. Ordinal data allow a broad range of statistical analysis than nominal data, including measures like median and mode and frequency distribution. Ordinal level are used in surveys and research to capture ordered categories such as income group, satisfaction rating, very satisfied to very dissatisfied, or race finishing position. While ordinal scales provide information on ranking, they do not quantify the degree of difference between categories. So, arithmetic operations like calculating means are generally inappropriate. Thus, ordinal measurement adds meaningful order to data, enabling researchers to analyze relative position and trends while acknowledging limitations in measuring precise intervals between categories. Third is the interval level measurement. Internal level measurement refers to data that are measured on a scale which each unit is of equal size, allowing precise quantification of the difference between values, but without a meaningful absolute 0 point. Classical example of interval data include temperature measured in Fahrenheit or Celsius. The interval degrees are consistent and equal throughout the scale, but 0 does not represent the total absence of temperature. Similarly, calendar dates functions as interval scales measurement because the units, the days and years are regular, but the 0 point is a set by convention, not by a natural absence of time. In the social sciences, attitude measurement scales often mimic interval properties, but researcher must be careful as these may only approximate true intervals. Interval measurement enables the use of more advanced statistical techniques and allow comparison of the magnitude of difference between responses. Ratio level measurement is the fourth type of measurement, and this is the most advanced and precise scale, distinguished by having a true 0. Point meaning 0 indicates the complete absence of the property being measured. Familiar physical sciences variables like time, distance, speed, velocity, mass, and income are all measured at the ratio level. Ratio level measurement allows researcher to make a meaningful statement using ratios such as twice as fast or half as heavy, and to express measurement as multiple of fraction. Example, a meter is 100 times a centimeter. Unlike other scales, the ratio scale supports the full range of statistical analysis, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division because of its equal interval and absolute 0. You can compare values directly and calculate meaningful averages, variance, and use inferential statistical test. To determine the measurement scale for a variable, if values differ by category, it's nominal. If one value ranks over the another, it's ordinal. If you can measure equal differences of its interval, and if true ratio multiplies and 0 are meaningful, it's ratio. So, we have these four levels of abstraction, that is the ordinal. When we try to understand the level of abstraction, there are four levels: ordinal, nominal, then we have ratio, and we try to understand the level of abstraction by looking into the way in which we will understand the classification of data in terms of secondary and primary. And primary and secondary classification depends on the source of data, who is whether the researcher is close to the source of collection and the secondary data is a intermediate coming in. Somebody else had collected the data, but it is being interpreted and analyzed by a third party. And then we also kind of classify data depending on the way in which it has to be used. So, we have quantifiable data and the qualitative data. Now, the methodology will also depend. In quantitative data, most of the time we can depend on secondary source of data, because there is a lot of analysis, statistical analysis, and these details are already available in reports and other sources. Whereas qualitative data, which is kind of depending on text, which is depending on narrative and the content analysis, depends more on these primary source of data, because you are dealing with opinions, perceptions, and these can kind of change. Maybe you had a research 5 years back and the person was under different economic social conditions, so they told something different. Now, when after 5 or 10 years we kind of come into a place where the interview is again recording, so the content will differ. So, the qualitative data will depend completely on the source of the information, and qualitative data are kind of more in terms of lacking accuracy, because it is subjective to the opinion. Most of the time it uses open ended questionnaire and it is kind of very descriptive. So, how do one kind of understand whether what has been responded by the researcher is true or false? And then we discussed about the 4 levels of measurement, where we talked about ordinal, nominal, and in terms of the interval level, and then we have the ratio level. So, in the interval level, the 0 is not actually reflecting absence, but the ratio level says that the 0 has a value. So, with this we can understand the primary and secondary data. And good research does not pretend to deliver absolute truth. Instead, it offers well reasoned, transparently grounded conclusion that remain open to revision as better data and methods become available. So, it is an ongoing process, it is a kind of not one time process. Now, to understand the primary and secondary data, the reference for this reading is Volume and Nicholas 2010 Research Methods. The title of the book is Research Method, the Basics. It is published by Routledge, London, and chapter 4 talks about the primary and secondary data. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.